Ohio, established Fort Pitt. We're now back to Flanagan here, okay?
I just cut to the end of the story.
That's how Pitt got in, Fort Pitt, Pittsburgh came to be.
Yeah, so that's the ancient history, but relevant. I mean, there's a lot of pride here, and our roots really do go back that far. I mean, the French and Indian War played a big part in eventually leading to the American Revolution. So in some ways, the opening shots here, were very relevant to what became the United States. There's a very proud history in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, if you want to, you should remember that King George, after the French and Indian War, wherein the British prevailed, thought he had depleted all his coffers for the benefit of the colonists. Thought that only fair and proper that those coffers be replenished, and put a tax, okay, on tea, leading to the Tea Party. So, as Bill said, the translation between the French and Indian War and the Revolutionary War is reality.
So, and you'll see evidence. I don't know if you all have a chance to get into Point State Park, but if you do, walk down in there, and the oldest structure still standing in Pittsburgh, I believe, is what's called the Fort Pitt Blockhouse. And it's a brick building next to the Fort Pitt Museum, which is a reconstruction, but you can get a little bit of a feel, a little bit of a taste of that history from 250 years ago. So we've been around a long time, and in many ways, Pittsburgh led the Industrial Revolution of the United States. Started around 150 years ago, right after the first oil well was drilled here in Pittsburgh in 1859, just north of Pittsburgh. First natural gas well in history was here. The world's first oil refinery was in downtown Pittsburgh. The Pittsburghers electrified the world with alternating current, the Westinghouse engineers, and basically that's the way the grid works everywhere. That was all developed and invented commercial broadcasting. The station I worked for, KDKA, was the world's first commercial broadcasting station. So we've always played above our weight and have always had a significant impact throughout American history, really going all the way back 250 years. Lately, times have been pretty good. We were one of the first 3 metros in the United States to recover all of the jobs that we had lost during the Great Recession. So Pittsburgh really led the country out of the recession. Right now, we have record levels of employment throughout the region, so that at the highest level in our history, even compared to our heyday of steelmaking 40 years ago. We also have the largest labor force in our history, people available to work. The growth rate in jobs has slowed lately relative to the rest of the country and other places we compare ourselves to, but we're still growing year over year. Employment is up, and Case Western really reported that over the last 4 years, Pittsburgh ranked number 3 in the United States in growth of per capita wages in the United States. So the jobs that have been created, the economy that's been built is much more of a high wage, knowledge economy than just sort of lower wage kinds of employment that's been happening here. The other good news is we're net positive on population, and that's relatively recent. Pittsburgh actually lost population from about 1970 on. From the 1960s was the peak. The entire metro lost population, the city especially. In the last few years, we've turned the corner and the population is growing. More people are moving into the region every year than are moving out. Countering that is the fact that the death rate exceeds the birth rate here. And we are one of the few major metros in the United States which has what's called net morbidity, which means basically the death rate exceeds the birth rate. The good news for Pittsburgh is most of the rest of the country is going to follow us into that position over the next decade or so. And we'll actually have one of the
lowest. Tell me something.
Yeah, it's one of our challenges. But the good news is the young people moving into the region are better educated than their counterparts across the United States. So Pittsburgh, for the most recent study I saw, has the 3rd highest concentration of young people with advanced degrees in the United States. The only 2 metros that have a higher concentration of young people with a master's or above are New York and Boston. And Cleveland State, which is of course up in Cleveland, recently wrote about it, and they said which metro in the United States has the best chance of becoming the next Boston. And Cleveland State concluded it was Pittsburgh, which had to have been hard for anybody in Cleveland to say.
Very hard. We're playing the Browns this weekend.
So yeah, it's always on our mind. Yeah. So it's been a pretty good story. It's a pretty remarkable transformation, especially when you think about where we came from a generation ago. I mentioned employment today at the highest level in history. 1979 was our previous peak. That was the heyday of the Steel City, right? That was the peak of steel-related employment. The economy collapsed in the early 1980s. And we lost well over 200,000 manufacturing jobs in the space of just 2 years, 2 or 3 years. When I got here in 1982. The following year in 83, the metro unemployment rate was over 18%. Oh, are you guys watching the pierogies out there? Are they, yeah, I'll stop because I know you can't help the point. Yeah, so our baseball team, we have pierogi races at like the 5th and 5th inning, whatever it is, 5th and 5th inning. So it looks like they're out there doing pierogi photography. So there's 5 pierogies and they race during every Pittsburgh baseball game. So, part of our tradition.
Our national pierogi.
So we hold on to some things that are near and dear to us, like our pierogies. You had a fitting lunch. But at any rate, the bust that happened in Pittsburgh was profound. I mentioned in 83 we hit rock bottom. The metro unemployment rate was over 18% that year. In Beaver County, just on the other side of the airport, the unemployment rate that year was 29%. In 84, 50,000 people moved away. Net population loss of 50,000 in a single year, and we lost people at that rate for years. So we've gone from a metro population of about 3 million in 1970 to about 2.6 today. So, you know, and as I say, that's now stopped and reversed, but the consequences of the loss, it's left us as one of the older populations in the United States and one of the older workforces in the United States as a result. So, given what happened here, arguably what was the biggest economic setback suffered by any region in the United States in the second half of the 20th century, the fact that we're standing is remarkable. The fact that we're outperforming most of the country is I think, even more so. So it's a great story and it's wonderful to tell. And as I mentioned, Chuck's been here throughout this period. What I thought we could do, I started with the end of the story. I think maybe we go back to sort of this transition over the last 30 years, but I think the other important lesson is what we accomplished in the last 35 years we couldn't have done had it not been for the prior 35 years. So maybe we can begin with where we were in the late 1970s and 1980s and sort of what happened here in Pittsburgh to get our arms around the calamity and sort of begin to turn the place around.
Yeah, let's really go back to 1944.
Okay, you want to start literally with laying the groundwork. Okay, that's fine.
I think it's helpful because what we're talking about today, this afternoon, is collaboration. Collaboration between the private sector, the public sector, and the nonprofit sector. And that collaboration, looking at various initiatives, which we'll demonstrate to you, enabled us to say right now that on the issue of collaboration, we're pretty good at it. Why are we pretty good? Because we've been doing it a long time and learned all the mistakes along the way. The first initiative was smoke control legislation coming out of our basic industry back in the 1940s, right after the war. This was a dark and dismal atmosphere. I can recall I was born and raised in a little mill town down the road, Coriopolis, and going to school in the morning, pulling a tassel cap over my face, looking through the threads. The street lights were on. If I didn't do that, my face was black when I got to school. I mean, it was that bad. So the first initiative was to do something about smoke cleanup, and that involved a collaboration between the private and the public sector, particularly the mayor at that time, David Lawrence, and the county commissioners, and it led to the formation of the Allegheny Conference on Community Development. Back then, the conference was headed up by, in terms of members, on it maybe 10, 12, 13 people, all heads of industry in the community, all looking to develop the mission statement, which I think Bill mentioned before, was to increase the quality of life in this region, both economically and culturally. And so the first initiative was smoke control legislation. That was followed by flood control legislation. Going back to 1936, we had a horrible flood and we needed to do something about it.
I think in the 36 flood, we would have probably been, well, your shoes would be almost surfacing water during the 36
That's surprising. It was that significant.
Wow.
That then led into, these are success stories. And by the way, as we go along, I'm not even going to mention the collaborative ways and who did the collaboration, mentioned the initiatives that were touched. But one takeaway that is common to all of these initiatives and all the success stories that the conference had in dealing with these initiatives was remembering that you can't get a consensus on a solution to a problem until and unless you first get people aboard recognizing that there is a problem. Once you get them on board, recognize they're in a problem, then the issue of collaboration commences to work. How can we solve it? And we were, in one sense, blessed. In second sense, the blessing was diminished by a wonderful group of ethnic heritage that this community had. We had pockets then and still have pockets of the Irish, the German, the Jewish, the Polish, the Lithuanian, the Italian, all with wonderful work habits, all with very solid value systems. We have more churches around here than you'll find on the